the title of this fireside chat with Billy Andrews, aka as the Dark Tenor, is it's a chat on punk and rock in classical music. Well, you know, before we get into that, I just want to say I'm so happy that you are here with us. You've been an inspiration for quite a while now, since you first turned up at the Karajan Music Tech Conference a few years ago. So welcome, Billy Andrews.
Thank you very much for giving me the time to speak and for the invitation. And Matthias, a big up to you and everyone involved for making this, you know, quick change to the Karajan Music Tech. I'm putting it online and streaming it to everyone. I mean, it's time to really take a few things digital, and it really takes what I do, making classical music accessible to anyone out there, really to the next level. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for everyone in your team and involved for making this happen this quick.
Of course, of course. So Billy, you are a performer who started out presumably with, you know, a very traditional singing career in classical. Your voice is trained by classical technique, but at some point you decided, okay, well, I'm gonna actually perform my own music. I take the music of the classics and I give it a special ring and punk and rock feeling. When did you make that change, and what led you to that? I just want to understand a little bit what the journey was for you.
Well, the journey really started me being in classical music. I was a member of the Dresdner Kreuzchor for 8 years, and then I got to sing in the Semper Opera in Dresden in the extra choir for 2 years. But when I went through that voice change, I was an alto before, and I switched over to being a tenor later, first tenor. I really, being in that vocal change period as a teenager, I got into bands like Green Day, all kinds of punk bands, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith. I started loving Metallica, but, you know, for me, the difference was never really that big. You know, my mom, obviously, being a classical musician, my dad being a classical musician, they never really understood why I was starting to get into rock and roll bands and punk bands and all that. So for me, there was never really a big difference between a Green Day or, let's say, Beethoven, or a metal band and Beethoven, right? Mm-hmm. So I really started loving both sides and all kinds of genres. I started getting into crossover. I loved the German band H-Blocks, for example, also it being a crossover twist. And so I never really put up borders between genres, and I always loved music as a, you know, a way to communicate from the stage to the people, as you've just had in your talk before this one, right? So I really think that's an interesting point. And when I turned into a tenor and I started singing as a tenor in the choirs, I really always stuck with rock and roll and punk music, and I started playing bass guitar in a band, and started teaching myself guitar, and stopped playing the violin for a while. I learned how to play the violin for 16 years. So I've also been introduced to classical instruments. And at some point, being at the Semper Opera, I was like, and singing Lohengrin in the choir, I was like, Jesus, is this going to be the rest of my life? And am I going to stay in a choir that makes you turn old really quick? You know, and I love classical music, and I would see people falling asleep in the audience, and I'd be going like, oh, Jesus, I don't know. So 2010, I moved to Berlin, and I started working on my own music. And I connected with songwriters. I connected with a producer in Berlin, Bernd Wendland, who also produced Silbermond, a huge German band, and a lot of other German platinum gone acts, awarded acts. And we started developing the idea of the Dark Tenor. So what is the Dark Tenor? How does a classical crossover project, what is it like? You know, is it another tenor who has tattoos, and he's basically the badass son of Il Divo, you know, is he a boy group kind of rogue gone guy? And I was like, no, man, we really need to give classical music a twist, and we really need to, you know, bring back the rock and roll in classical music and the punk aspect of it. You know,
you say like, bring back. That implies that it was there before. And how do you see that? Do you think that someone like Beethoven or Mozart, that they were sort of revolutionaries in their day and age?
Yeah, I would guess so, man. I mean, Mozart. There's so many tales about Mozart being a crazy guy and not being able to handle money or alcohol or parties or women in general. It really sounds like a rock star style life, right? and I mean, these were crazy dudes, man. These days we use laptops. We have every instrument we want to use at the tip of our finger to compose new music. These guys would sit at their pianos, write music, have it all in their heads. I'm trying not to use cuss words. They had all of that stuff in their head, and they would, you know, just lay it out and have an orchestra play it, and they would be passionate about it, and they would cuss their asses off, and they'd be, you know, really heavy on the musical aspect of it. And
so I imagine that some people in the world of you know, the Kreuzchor and the Semperoper, perhaps, you know, when they see you, you know, don't approve of what you're doing now. Is this something that you get often, or do they say like, it's actually quite cool what you're doing now, Billy?
Well, my first album, my debut album, I did have the Dresdner Kreuzchor for the track Miserere, which is a spin-off of Gregorio Allegri's Miserere. So I did have them sing on it.
Okay.
But that's basically it. The Semper Opera always ignored me as good as they could. And yeah, the classical world really is, not all of them, but there are big parts of it who disapprove of what I do. And I think that's pretty cool.
So your fans definitely like what you do. Is the fact that you actually bring classical music into these other genres like punk and rock, does that help people to then go out and also listen to Beethoven? Or what's your experience? Can you tell us a little bit about stories that you know of your fans and their journey on that border of rock, punk, and classical music?
Totally. So my fans are really middle of the road. You know, they're between 35 and 55 years, maybe older even. My shows are filled with families. It's not a typical punk rock teenager kind of audience, but it's people who love great music. They're passionate about their artists. They're passionate about their music.
Right.
And responses have been, oh, so finally my child, through listening to your music, has fallen in love with the violin, or my child now wants to learn how to sing the Dies Irae from the Mozart Requiem, which is, in my opinion, a heavy metal song, right? Wow. So I mean, it's the title is Day of Wrath, right? Dies Irae. So I mean, that's not a,
it sounds like a 90s metal album,
right? It's not a song that you would sit down and go, oh, that's pretty nice. You know? It's really, so what I do live is I take an electric guitar and I play Dies Irae, and it has an electric guitar and a rock band playing to it. And so that excitement really transports and communicates with the audience. And there's been, you know, fans have written me, so my daughter has this essay she has to do on Mozart, and she's a big fan of Mozart now. She'll wear one of my t-shirts with Mozart on it, saying Klassik ist geil and classical rebel and all that. And kids of all ages will picture and see classical music a little differently through the lens that I have if they want to look through it, you know.
Do you think this is about also the stories around the music that you tell? You know, classic rebel. That's of course, a really nice tagline, and then you can weave stories around it. Is this something that is important to building a brand like yours and interacting with communities these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to build a brand that fans can communicate with. That they can go out and say, I really love this idea and I want to spread the word about it, being positive about it, using music as a positive thing in your life. And I think it's not only about my brand, the Dark Tenor, which is the core brand, but it's also about building a world around that core brand of making classical music cool, and sound cool, and making it adaptable for the people out there. And there's so many things that are already being done by opera houses for kids. There's, you probably know yourself, there's a lot of stuff where kids can go and look behind the scenes and see the Queen of the Night before she goes on stage and all that. But the reality is you'll sit in the opera house, and your ticket that you can buy will put you on a seat where you can only see her legs hanging from the ceiling when she's singing her aria, her piece, right? So it's I'm really trying to take the essential classical music parts to the masses, and it seems like it's working, and it seems like people are converting over to loving classical music through those brands. Yeah.
Well, what do you say to people who say, well, classical music, it's all about the high degree of craftsmanship, and you have to, be appreciative of that. So you have to really sit through these 4 hours before you, get the final aria, and then you get the chills. And is this, what do you say when someone says, well, it's all nice and well to communicate this way, but in the end of the day, it's about this amazing craftsmanship?
Yeah, well, that having that highlight at the end of the opera, and you sit through that Wagner opera for, 4 hours is short, right? Let's say 6 hours. And you get that big, that's the melody we've been waiting for. But you know what, man? In reality, people out there are using Spotify, they're using Apple Music, they're using YouTube to consume music, and it's all at your fingertips, and no one's gonna, the mainstream won't sit through an opera of 6 hours. And so why hide that brilliant craftsmanship from the mainstream and make them sit through a 6-hour opera? If anyone asked me, I'd go like, dude, Parsifal is probably not the first opera you should go and see, if you're new to opera.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just going to take forever, and it has 3 breaks, and it's just very long.
Yeah.
So why hide these beautiful melodies from people who would love to hear it, and it would generate kids wanting to, or it would make kids love those melodies and thus love classical music. So why hide it? Why hide great craftsmanship, and why keep it for yourself? It makes no sense.
It's about, there are multiple ways of doing things, and you can do it this way for that audience and maybe change it a little bit for that other audience. And not, there's not one truth. I think that's another truth. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your fascination with technology and innovation, which is, ultimately what brought you to our conference. When we met, it was really at the Innovation Lab of the Karajan Music Tech Conference. And you were with Ricardo Simeon playing on a 3D printed ukulele. I think you were playing the Ode to Joy and singing it into a camera. And I said, like, who's that dude? Why did you come to the Karajan Music Tech Conference, and what is your interest in innovation? Let us know what you think there.
Well, I got invited, I think, by Volkswagen last year to come and see the Osterfestspiele. and I was really excited and stoked to come and see it. And you know, everyone said you gotta go and visit the Karajan Music Tech because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and it's very interesting to watch. And I'm always, you know, always interested to discover new stuff, and my eyeballs are always out there looking at stuff because I'm a workaholic, and I always love looking at new stuff. So yeah, I really got inspired by what Ricardo did last year. And for everyone watching, Ricardo Simian, he took flutes. I think, if I remember right, correct me if I'm wrong. He took flutes from a museum and replaced parts in the flutes that they found beneath the grounds somewhere, right?
Yeah, well, bone flutes from ancient times, right? Bone flutes. Like
bone flutes.
You can't touch them anymore. They are so old, you know, they are behind glass. But if you scan them, then you can print them in 3D. And then you can play on an instrument that you otherwise couldn't touch because it would go all into dust immediately.
Crazy, right? And I watched that and I was like, that is crazy, because who would ever hear that original sound of that bone flute ever, right? So I got really inspired by it, and I wandered around on the Karajan Music Tech Conference, and I looked at some stuff, and there was no one at Ricardo's stand, and I was like, oh, there's instruments. Oh, those instruments are white. Why are they white? So I picked up a ukulele and started singing Ode to Joy, and then that's where you and I met.
Yeah.
And so that really got me into, that really started off my travel for how can I combine technology, new fabrics, maybe artificial intelligence, and all that kind of stuff that's out there with classical music. Take the old music, you know, the craftsmanship, and combine it with technologies we have these days that are still evolving, that aren't even in their final industrial stages, I'd say. You know, they're not in the mainstream. You can buy, a friend of mine, she teaches music at a school in Bonn in Germany, and their school has a 3D printer, actually.
Oh, wow.
Like, well, that's
not
really
the school
cool.
that I went to, definitely. In Bonn.
I mean, they have like a small printer for kids to fuss around and to experiment on.
Okay.
And so it is starting to, you know, tag its way into the schooling system somehow, these technologies. And I was like, okay, so how can that applies to what I do. So how can I create new music? So I got into, one thing is artificial intelligence. I got into a songwriting program called AIVA. For everyone to look up, it's spelled AIVAI, I think. AIVA or AIVA.
AIVA, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. And I started working with that last year, and got really inspired by how it works, what kind of ideas it comes up with, and they're constantly improving it. So usually what you'll do as a musician, you'll sit down with others, you'll play with others, you'll brainstorm back and forth. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, so I get to do this online with an artificial intelligence that I've never met, and someone who's really quick and who'll essentially come up with ideas from different cultures, with Indian music, with African music, with all kinds of styles that with my brain and my feel for music, would have never come up with. So it really widened my horizon of what it means to compose music these days, and how to expand ideas around that.
Yeah, I often, when I give my presentations on artificial intelligence in music, I say that AI does not actually stand for artificial intelligence, but for augmented intelligence, right? And for that to be true, you have to allow this creative artificial intelligence to become inspirational artificial intelligence. Yeah, and I think that's a very important way of looking at new technologies, right? You could either go the way where you say like, oh, no, I don't want to have anything to do with that because the way we did it the last 200 years is the best. Or you could say, well, let's see, what can I do with this?
Yeah, you know what? And that's what I like about you, especially, and also what Karajan was about, you know, innovation and changing things, and that is a very punk rock kind of mindset. You know, it's punk rock doesn't care. Punk rock, or it used to not care. Mainstream punk rock does care these days. It's about paying bills, but you know, punk rock didn't care. They would take something and just change it and do whatever they wanted to do. They were the classic rebel out there, you know. Yeah. And these days, I think the punk rock attitude and the punk rock brain lifestyle, not the lifestyle as such as, you know, being drunk and, you know, that no one will do that these days. But the mindset and the attitude is something that I consider very, very interesting. And a lot of people out there are being punk rocks with their technology, you know, combining it with stuff that usually would have never made a match with it. So it's really, really cool. I think there's a lot of stuff out there to mix things up and make it interesting.
Yeah. So Billy, you have to help me a little bit here because I don't know. We talk a lot about you using technology also in your shows and so on. I don't know what can go out there into the world yet. Is there a particular project that you're working on right now that you can share a little insight on how you actually use the technology? And we can talk about your new EP that is coming out also, but share a little bit on what are your plans for technology going forward?
So after visiting the Karajan Music Tech last year, I started creating vision of taking the instrument that I played for most of my life, which is a violin, taking that, putting it on stage, 3D printing it, and integrating it into my light show. So I looked up and researched a lot, and with a few developers in Berlin, and I started developing a 3D printed translucent violin.
Wow.
Which is actually, except for the prototyping, it's very inexpensive.
Oh, really?
In the end, to build and to buy. So imagine this being printed within a short time period and being delivered to schools for kids. This violin will not break as quick as a wooden violin will. The violin is, you can make it really small. You can make it, you know, a normal size violin for anyone to play. And you can use it for anyone who can't afford an expensive violin. You know?
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Why is it translucent?
Why is it translucent? Well, what I wanted to do, as I said, is I want to integrate it. And that was the first thought. I was like, I love playing live shows, right? So how can I put this on stage? And just putting a violin on stage that's white, I mean, okay, great news, right? And then you'll have to tell everyone, yeah, but we 3D printed it and all that. And it's really cool. And everyone will go, oh, it's 3D printed. Well, we didn't know. It just looks like a white violin. So I was like, okay, so what if I could picture an orchestra of maybe, let's say 20 or 30 violinists. And what if they all had a violin that was operationally controllable by a light engineer and would have LEDs in them? So look at this orchestra. Every single violin has more than 200 nano LEDs in them. Wow. And you can configure, and this is just the first prototyping version, right? So, so you can take each LED, each segment, you can change the color, you can make this whole orchestra glow in different colors. You can have strobe stuff going on if you want a rock and roll feel to it. You can have purple to yellow to green, so you can have it swipe all over through the orchestra and create like a rainbow kind of feel to it. And every single violin can change in its color. So I do have one of the prototypes we've been working on. And all of this is going to be without cables. It'll be with cables. So there's different kinds of technology solutions. And you know what? If a violin breaks on the road,
just print a new one.
There you go. Right. Yeah. So it's really cool. And what we can do is it's made of plastic. And what we can do is we can take that plastic and we can use it to make a new violin. So it's not going to go out for waste into the oceans and make everything even worse, but it's actually going to go back to its original product. So that's another pretty cool thing. So listen, I have a violin here. I'll show it to you. Let's see how this works with the background that we have here, because the background.
Yeah, it's difficult. You have to put it in front of yourself. Well, it's really hard to see.
That's a good idea. Wait, watch this.
Yeah, this works. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the violin. It's made of two parts. This the body of the violin is printed as a complete fussing around. We'll change that in a second. Watch. So this is this part is printed as one, and then the neck is printed separately. All you do is you put it together. There's a carbon rod that runs through it from the bottom to the top, and that's it.
Wow, awesome. Can we see the lights?
Yes. Wait a second. Let me hook it up. I'm phone to do it. Let's see how well you can see the lights, though. Let's see here. Okay. All right.
Oh my God! Look at this, guys.
Okay, so this is. Let's see if I can. There we go.
Oh, it changes the color.
That's much better. There you go. So wow. This version, I told my text to make me a version that I can actually control with my iPhone, which is really cool. So it's right now it's in the mode that it can change colors by itself, and it'll just run through a few beautiful colors. But remember, this will be controllable by the light technician. So I have my phone here.
Yeah.
And I can make it go solid in an instant, for example.
Nice.
But I can also make it go change colors quicker.
And you're doing that live right now on your phone?
I'm doing that. Yeah, that's live, man. You see that?
Oh my God, look at that.
Let's see if I can make it. Here we go. That's good. Right? So it can go quicker, it can go slower, it can change colors like that. And I can tell it to just go white.
Nice.
Right? And it's translucent all the way around.
And and it sounds like a regular violin.
Yeah. You know what? I did order a bow. I have two prototypes, and one prototype is in with my developer right now with a bow, and I ordered a bow, but it won't be here until Monday. But okay. Yeah, it sounds like. And I have one that's a little thinner in the material.
Yeah. But
this material is thicker, and it sounds even better. And my mom's a professional violinist. It's actually, you know what? It's actually good for video calls too, because it generates a good light for your face.
Yeah, well, you know, Billy, I can already see how with the community of the Karajan Music Tech Conference, we're going to do a couple of fascinating projects. One is we'll put sensors on the instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And what the other thing is we actually use the sensors that you can put on the bodies of your audience to actually show the emotion that they are feeling with the orchestra. We can go crazy, and we could go on forever, but time is running out. It's already 12:30. So I want to thank you for sharing your enthusiasm, your craftsmanship, and your ideas with us here today. And I'm really looking forward to continuing this discussion with you some other time. For now, I want to thank you and hope you
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and for anyone out there, just a little bit of promotion. I have a new EP coming out. If you're interested, you can pre-order it now and listen to it on thedarktenor.com. But other than that, man, Matthias, you're doing
Beethoven, right? It's called Beethoven.
Yeah, it's called Ludwig.
Ludwig, yeah.
Yeah, man. It's
So on
the
a
first
personal
of an
basis.
EP. It's the first of an EP trilogy. I'm doing 3 EPs on this EP. It's called Ludwig. We're calling these guys out with their first names, not with their last names. And so the next one's going to be Wolfgang, and the third one's going to be Johann Sebastian. And yeah, man, just go and have a listen. Matthias, thank you very much for inviting me. I really love what you're doing and your team's doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Billy. Bye-bye.